Pitt basketball released their non-conference schedule for the 2022-23 season this week. Now that they have a full ACC slate of opponents and a full non-conference slate of, an almost full, I should say, non-conference slate of opponents, all we're really waiting on is TV time, TV designation, and tip-off times. Let's break down the non-conference schedule a little bit, shall we? Now that we have an almost full slate of opponents, I'll get to that in a minute. Season kicks off on November 7th against UT Martin. Return of Parker Stewart. November 11th, they welcome West Virginia to the Pitt. November 16th through the 17th, they'll head to Brooklyn for the Legends Classic. That's what I was referring to, the not completely full slate of opponents. They know that they will get 2 games on back-to-back days, picked from a pool of VCU, Arizona State, and Michigan. November 20th, they come back to the Pitt for a date with Alabama State on Sunday. On November 22nd, Farley Dickinson comes to the Pitt, and after a Thanksgiving break, William & Mary comes to the Pitt on November 25th. A few days later, on November 28th, they travel to Northwestern for their first true road game of the season. It also kicks off back-to-back games against Power 5 opponents. On December 7th, they will travel to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt. On December 10th, they play Sacred Heart and round out their non-conference schedule on December 17th against North Florida. All right, let's start at the very, very top. The season opener against UT Martin should have a little bit of flair to it. It's one you hope that Pitt wins and wins easily in. But Parker Stewart, a former Pitt Panther, makes his return to the Pitt for the first time since transferring to UT Martin following his first year, his freshman season at Pitt. He was a Kevin Stallings recruit, really good shooter. Went to UT Martin to play under his dad, who was the head coach there. So, if it is a blowout, that'll at least be interesting. If this is an electrifying matchup on paper, there are some interesting storylines to it. The West Virginia game will have a little bit more juice behind it for obvious reasons. Pitt welcomes West Virginia to the Pitt for the first time since 2019, before the pandemic began. The last year's game was pretty brutal if you're Pitt, not just because they lost by double digits. In fact, it felt like they should have lost by a lot more. They turned the ball over 31 times in that game. 31. That's insane. That's an insane number. I don't think I've ever seen that many turnovers in any basketball game ever in my life. Now, I don't mean to beat a dead horse. Pitt was undermanned in that game. Femi Odekale was really the only ball handler that they had ready to go. Onyeo Ziakidu was, he could could have given you a spark, but he was not playing the same kind of minutes and was not in the same kind of flow at that point in the season as he was later in the season when he was really contributing. Jamarius Burton was still hurt. He still had a nagging injury. Nike Savande was obviously out for the whole year. So, to piggyback off of that, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch that game this year and see how the new guards and the extensive, the depth in the backcourt, how that plays into that game and how that factors into Pitt's attack against that West Virginia press defense, which is infamous for not just giving the Panthers hell, but for giving everyone they play hell. Bob Higgins is a great coach, and he coaches that particular brand of defense really well. So, I think that game should be at least a little bit more entertaining than the one last year. Next up, the Legends Classic. So, the interesting thing about those 2 games and that set of opponents is that VCU might be the toughest opponent on, of those 3, VCU, Arizona State, Michigan. It's not that Arizona State or Michigan will be pushovers, but VCU was the one closest to making the tournament, the NCAA tournament of these 3, and they had to win their conference. Michigan always comes with a lot of hype just because of Juwan Howard and the way he can recruit. Arizona State was solid. They were in the top 25 at one point last year. But both of these teams kind of faltered down the stretch and weren't really the same team that they were early in the season. So if Pitt can avoid VCU, I'd be really comfortable saying that's 2 wins right there, or 2, if not likely wins, then toss-ups or probable wins. Next up, this stretch, Alabama State, Fairleigh Dickinson, William & Mary. That's 3 games in 5 days. That's one that I look at as kind of that's, you look at those opponents, and on paper you're like, should be easy wins and easy blowouts, and yeah, but they will be coming home after the Legends Classic, against Power 5 opponents. Those have a little in New York City, in Brooklyn, in the Barclays Center. They have a little bit of, there's a little bit more prestige to those games than coming home to play Alabama State at noon on a Sunday on ACC Network Extra in front of a sleepy Pete, I'd have to assume. This is a stretch. That's not to mention that Thanksgiving is sandwiched in between the Fairleigh Dickinson game and the William & Mary game. So that is one where I think you should look for kind of that St. Francis, PA, or Nicholls State, or the Citadel-esque upset. One that you kind of don't see coming out of left field, and comes out of left field. It's a letdown against definitely an inferior opponent, but I think particularly, Fairleigh Dickinson and that William & Mary game are going to be the ones where Pitt can kind of stumble a little bit. Even if they do, hey, maybe that'll light a fire under them. Maybe losing to kind of an inferior opponent like that will set them up well for back-to-back Power 5 road games against Northwestern and Vanderbilt. This is a Pitt program that is 5-34 over the past 4 seasons in true road games. Only one of those has come against a non-Power 6 opponent. So, while Northwestern and Vanderbilt aren't the most daunting of opponents, you do have to look at that recent history and think about, okay, going to play a Power 5 opponent on the road, what does that mean? Sacred Heart in North Florida could be one of those letdown games if it doesn't come earlier in the thing. I do expect only one, but I think those are games with ample rest in between them, and the games before that Pitt should really be fine. As long as they're not looking too far ahead to ACC play, I think they'll be okay. So as far as predictions go, I'm not trying to be a huge predictions guy, but it's easy to see at least 7 wins in these 10 games, or in these 11 games, I'm sorry. I think there will be at least 3 losses right now, just given where Pitt is, given the fact that we haven't seen this new roster kind of play together and play any organized basketball together, that you can pencil in that West Virginia game as a loss. Maybe if they impress us a lot in the 2 scrimmages they hold earlier, the 2 exhibitions that they hold early in the year, or if they really beat the brakes off of UT Martin, I might be more inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt and make that West Virginia game more of a toss-up, especially considering the Mountaineers have kind of a retooled roster. So, second game of the year, maybe everyone needs time to gel. Maybe Pitt can take advantage of that. Who knows? Again, I think there'll be one random loss in there that a letdown. I mentioned those games: Citadel, State, Western Michigan. It happens. It happens with these Pitt teams. It just does. And so, until I get proven otherwise, I'm going to pencil one of those in. And then the Legends Classic is, I think, where one more loss in this non-conference slate could come from. I think if they draw VCU, that's not the best thing for them. Arizona State and Michigan, I think, would be much more favorable matchups. VCU is a tough team. Again, one of those low major teams that builds and develops slowly, and then they kind of come at you all at once, and they have really good seasons out of that. I think that's also a VCU team that would be really hungry after missing the NCAA tournament last year, and I don't think you want to face them third or fourth game of the season while they still have Revenge Tour on their mind. So I think all in all, I'd call it 7-3 at the end of, or 8-3, I'm sorry, at the end of the non-conference schedule and heading into ACC play, which, if you're Pitt, I'm not sure you can complain about that. You do have to play better in ACC play than you have historically to get where you want to be, but 7-3 sets you up really well. You play in the ACC, usually 20 wins gets you there. So getting 7 right off the bat, 7 or 8, that sets you up really well for a successful ACC schedule.